Hello, Up Radio listeners. This is Brant coming at you again from KACT 105.5 FM, covering Andrews, Seminole, Odessa, Midland, and beyond on the internet, Facebook, and YouTube. And we're so happy that you're with us today on Up Radio. Very excited about today's interview. A dear brother, New York Times best-selling author. They call him the Christian Indiana Jones. And you're going to hear all about his books, all about his fantastic revolutionary teaching. Welcome to the show, Dr. Ron Charles. How you doing?
It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, it's always a pleasure to talk to you, Dr. Ron. Now, you came to Andrews a while back and to the Crossbar Cowboy Church, and they loved you.
Yes.
Those who have been in the Permian Basin or who have watched God's Learning Channel has seen a lot of your programs as well. But, you know, people may not realize that Dr. Ron Charles also travels the globe, not only speaking and teaching on just the revolutionaries' teachings that verify the Bible. It's historic proofs of the existence of Jesus and his miracles, some of those as recorded by the Romans. But also, he has the Cubit Foundation. Of course, if you listen to this show, you definitely want to go to cubitfoundation.org. That's C-U-B-I-T, foundation.org, because as great as the books are and as great as the teachings are, what's even fantastic is the fact that Dr. Ron Charles ministers to the persecuted church in places where the average Christian would never dream of going. And he does that. His son Brad does that as well. If you go to thecubitfoundation.org right now as you're listening, especially those who are coming to us from Facebook, go ahead and open a new window. Look at thecubitfoundation.org. Every time that you book Dr. Ron Charles to speak at your church or special event, every time that you order these books, you are helping to further a revolutionary ministry that touches the globe, especially the persecuted believers. And you're also helping build orphanages and hospitals, things like that in South America and beyond. And so, again, Dr. Ron Charles, man, we love you. You're a part of our family now. And I'm just excited to have you on Up Radio.
Thank you, my brother. Thank you, my brother.
You, oh yeah, and you know our friends who have gotten your book, The Search, and also they've gotten Chasing Jesus. These really are you and I kind of joked about it, but you know what? Truly, really and truly, you could call these the forbidden teachings of Jesus because they verify the history of Jesus. But for some reason, this information has been kept from the world, Dr. Ron. And you spent a long time in Europe, Middle East, Asia, America, verifying and researching the historic miracles.
I spent a total of 33 years when I wrote The Search, and then 10 additional years when writing Chasing Jesus. So a total of research for 43 years in over 50 countries.
Wow. And, you know, I mean, when I first met you at God's Learning Channel, you know, you sat there and you you recorded 12 shows in one day, you know, teaching lesson after lesson about the truths of Jesus. You know, Dr. Ron, you have a new book that we're gonna go more into too, and we'll ask more about The Search and Chasing Jesus, because I know that any person out there that really wants to know the truth about Jesus, don't buy a Time magazine every year and read the same half-baked information. Get your hands on The Search, or get your hands on Chasing Jesus, or get your hands on one of the many ebooks that you can have access to, that you can buy and download from thecubitfoundation.org. And also, those of you who are joining us on the internet, you know, it looks like Dr. Ron's going to be even more of a regular presence on the internet with his teachings. And we're so excited to be a part of that, Dr. Ron. So this newest book, tell us what the title is and what it's about.
Well, my newest book that we just received just last week is called Rendering Unto Caesar. And basically it tells Jesus' position on our responsibility to the governments, as well as our responsibility to God, based on Jesus' answer whenever they said, should we pay should we pay taxes to Caesar? And then Jesus told them, so give me a coin. Said, whose image and whose inscription is on it? They said, Caesar's. And Jesus said, then render unto Caesar that which is Caesar, and unto God that which is God's. And so the book is an explanation of what all that encompassed.
Well, that's very exciting, Dr. Ron. Of course, you always have great designs for your books. Who does the graphic designing for your book covers?
You got a lovely wife.
There you go, buddy. You know what? Chrissy is involved in that. And of course, honestly, though, there's other book covers that she hasn't designed that are great. And you know what? Whenever you get materials from the cubitfoundation.org, pastors, teachers, seekers, you're getting information that most likely you've never heard in the church before, unless they're reading from the book. But you're also getting context. In Bible college, we heard over and over, context is king. Well, you know what? You don't hear a whole lot of context, but when you see some of the historical records and documents of Jesus alone, it will blow your mind. And Dr. Ron, you've been interviewed so much, you've been on television a lot. What's one of the biggest misconceptions about Jesus in your mind that people may have, that perhaps they might learn something different when they visit your ministry and the search or chasing Jesus?
I think one of the greatest misconceptions is the fact that Jesus was the teaching and the intent of presenting Jesus in a position of just a peasant, itinerant preacher that was probably known among his own people up in the Galilee, but he wasn't really known to the hierarchy, and he'd never even come in contact with any Roman officials until his crucifixion. Well, nothing could be further from the truth.
Wow.
Because Jesus was well known among the Jewish establishment as well as the Roman establishment, and so much so that there was, as you had already alluded to, some of these Roman historians, they followed him around and actually were eyewitnesses to some of the great things, great teachings and miracles that we're privy to in the Gospels. So I think one of the greatest misconceptions is that Jesus was just a backwater preacher, and
right.
Which was absolutely dead wrong.
Well, and when you read the search and when you read Chasing Jesus, you also learn that the Romans not only knew who he was, that many loved who he was. And again, a successful stonemason, a successful carpenter. I used to see these commercials years and years ago. He never traveled from 200 miles from the place he was born. Well, that may not necessarily be the truth.
That's true.
Some would say that he was very well traveled, very knowledgeable, even to tell parables illustrating stories in other cultures that he most likely had to have gone to, or had to have been really well educated too. A lot of people don't realize that the players in the drama of the Passion were actually relatives of Jesus too, such as Joseph of Arimathea. What was his role in relation to Jesus?
Yeah. Well, we know that Joseph of Arimathea was probably an uncle of Jesus. And so he was certainly a family member, and that Joseph was very high up in the Roman political establishment, and so he was and probably represented Rome in the Jewish Sanhedrin, which they did have representation there. They would never let the Sanhedrin meet by themselves. They would have to have a Roman representative there with them, and Joseph was that one who represented. So, there were some pretty close ties, close connections there.
Dr. Ron, you're a historian, and the stories that people are going to be hearing not only on the internet, but also, hearing on your audiobooks, your teaching CDs, your reading in your ebooks, experiencing you in person. You are a historian, but they also call you the Christian Indiana Jones for a reason, not just because of your archaeological background, which we'll touch on. But you've had a pretty adventurous life, being shot and stabbed. The things that have happened to you in your travels and in your adventures of uncovering the truths of Jesus. And people may not realize that when they encounter Dr. Ron Charles and the Cubit Foundation, it's even more than amazing scholarship and history and unbelievable but powerful humanitarian aids and efforts. But you're also a man who has gone out, quote unquote, where angels fear to tread, and you've been through a whole bunch in your adventure of uncovering these truths. One of the many things that has happened to you, you've been shot a couple of times at least.
Yes.
But there's actually a story that I think would be incredible if you could tell that about what happened to you. I believe it was in Syria on an archaeological dig.
Yeah, it was. The Golan Heights has changed hands back and forth between Israel and Syria for a number of years. Well, I was there during the Yom Kippur War and excavating. At a Roman fortification site in the Golan Heights. Well, at that time, Syria was claiming that portion of the Golan Heights, and it was up. We were up to the up in that region, not far from the River Jordan, but still in the Golan Heights region. And me and another archaeologist, guy from Scotland, were excavating. And this Syrian officer came up and said, wanted to know what we were doing. We told him we were excavating, and he had us get out of the pit where we were digging, and kneel down in front of him and put our hands behind our back. And he accused us of being spies, Israeli spies. Of course, we denied that, but he insisted that we were Israeli spies, and in the Scottish archaeologist that was with me, he became very irate and saying that he was a subject of the crown and they could not do that to him and this type of thing. And so this Syrian also shot him and killed him right there on the spot. And then he turned his gun over to me, the handgun that he had, and said, "Now you tell me the truth. You are Israeli spies. I want to know who you spy for and what is your mission." And I said, I'm not an Israeli spy. And I said, but, you're going to shoot me anyway. And so before you shoot me, I just want to tell you Jesus loves you and that he died for you, and he loves you even though you don't know him. And he screamed at me. He says, "Shut up! I don't want to hear about your Jesus." And of course, this guy was talking English better than I was actually. But then he pulled the trigger, and but the gun misfired. So he threw it down and ran back to his Jeep to get another gun. And when he did, I jumped up and ran off. And I started running back towards the Jordan River, and of course he was shooting at me all the time, and fortunately he didn't hit me when I was that close. But I came to a little ravine, maybe 4 or 5 feet jump off, and so I jumped off of that, and I had my hands up above my head when I did, and he did shoot me through my left wrist. And so when I hit the ground, I ripped my T-shirt off and wrapped it up, and I continued to run until I got to the Jordan River. And there was Israeli soldiers on the other side, on the Israeli side, and I jumped in and swam across, and they were there to receive me. And so they let me stay there for the night. And the next morning, I was awakened by some Israeli soldiers speaking through a megaphone. So I went outside of my tent and looked, and there on the other side of the Jordan, on the Syrian side, there was this officer, and he had brought back this guy that he had killed, the archaeologist that he had killed, and surrendered to the Israelis. And then they went over with a boat and got him and brought him back. And when he got to the other side, he pointed his finger at me and said, "I want to speak to the American." And so they let him come over, and I had the privilege of leading him to the Lord. And he had to go to prison. He stayed for 18 years in Israeli prison and became part of the Israeli-Syrian prisoner exchange. But while he was in prison, he led a lot of his comrades to the Lord. Actually went back to Damascus on his release and started a church there. And so it was fascinating.
Fascinating is an understatement. So you know, Dr. Ron, there's people out there that, well, once I come to Jesus, everything will be peaches and rainbows, and that's not always the case, is it, Dr. Ron?
No. We've been out there for almost 40 years in the Muslim countries, and in the year 2014, 170,000 believers died for the cause of Christ, and most of them in Islamic countries. And 2015, we don't have those statistics yet, but I'm sure there'll be at least what 2014 was. And so our biggest calling is to try to give ministry and help to those persecuted believers.
And you do that with much more than in just encouragement. You actually have an incredible program called Bags of Hope.
Yes, that's true.
And please tell us about Bags of Hope.
Well, the Bags of Hope are, it's actually a canvas bag, stands about 1 meter tall, or about a yard tall, and we fill it full of rice and beans and macaroni and tea and honey and things like that. And so it actually supports a widow and 4 children for an entire month. And so although we are delivering these things every day, each widow gets one every 30 days. And we always deliver these bags in the name of Jesus. And we started this a number of years ago, and it didn't start out being an evangelism tool, but over the years it certainly has done that. And so not only the Bags of Hope that we give to these persecuted widows, in the Islamic world, women are down at the bottom of the totem pole anyway, and widows are even below that. And so they would not, many of them would not have any means of support for them or their family without that. And these widows, because they are widows, and many of them because they're believers in Jesus, their entire existence is living under a bridge someplace, or under a stairwell someplace, or next to a sewage ditch or whatever. And we also deliver food and water purification machines to those persecuted believers that were once Muslim, but then they converted to Christianity, and they have to spend the rest of their lives in the garbage dumps of the cities in the Middle East.
And you're right there.
Yes, we are.
You're right there. And so, again, listeners, when you go to thecubitfoundation.org, when you buy the materials that you need to buy to grow in your knowledge of Jesus, or you also book Dr. Ron Charles at your church, or you go see him and you purchase the books as well, or when you give the Cubit Foundation, you're making a difference. You know, we've got to interview some fantastic people on Up Radio, but you know what? There's times you come across ministries that, not that the others are not valid, but some, again, are doing the work that Jesus told us to do in the most dangerous areas. When he said, I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was sick and in prison and you visited me. I was a stranger, you invited me in. I was naked and you clothed me. And so get behind the Bags of Hope program whenever you go to cubitfoundation.org. When you see Dr. Ron Charles speaking somewhere, anywhere close to you, seek that out. Go experience something. You'll experience not only a fantastic testimony, but you're going to learn some wonderful things that will only enhance your faith. Get a copy of Chasing Jesus. Get a copy of The Search. Get your hands on these teachings. You'll be able to see the covers. You'll be able to see the titles. The Man with the Withered Hand. The story of how that came together in the Bible. You're going to hear some things you've never heard before, verified by historical documents. And it just makes the Word is alive and active, but these illustrations and these teachings just help make it alive to you, the reader, and to the people that you're also teaching. Dr. Ron, right off the top of your head, what's one of these CDs that people can buy of the teaching? There's so many that you have.
Like you mentioned, the Man with the Withered Hand is one that, so for so many years, we ministers, missionaries, evangelists have kind of classified Jesus' miracles as major and minor. And the majors are the raising of Lazarus and healing of the woman with the issue of blood and this type of thing, whereas minor ones were Peter's mother-in-law being healed of a fever, and this man with a withered hand. He's kind of relegated to the position of a minor event. But when you look at the historical background behind why this man had a withered hand and the circumstances surrounding the horrifying experience that he went through in order to have that withered hand, and how Jesus counterbalanced the stigma that was associated with that and healed the man anyway, and healed him, reversing this tremendous curse that this man felt like he was under. And it's just phenomenal that once you get the background behind it, just how awesome this miracle was, and it was certainly not one of the minors that we're talking about.
No, not by any stretch of the imagination. Go ahead and go into it.
Well, the man with the withered hand was actually a stonemason, and he was chosen as one of the 217 stonemasons who was chosen to build the substructure and the superstructure of the Temple of Herod. And Herod received a premonition that he thought that he was going to die before the building was complete and the temple was complete, which rightly so. He did die before it was complete. But because he had this premonition, he ordered the stonemasons, who were all Jews, to work around the clock in 8-hour shifts, including the Sabbath day. And so, they had to get special permission from the construction manager, a man by the name of Yeshua Bensi. He said he had to get approval from the high priest, and Herod says, "No, you don't. This is me. I'm telling you to do this."
Right.
But they got permission from the priest anyway, and the priest issued a statement giving the stonemasons permission to work on the Sabbath day for the temple. But part of that construction included the Tower of Antonia. And so once the stonemasons were finished with what they were doing for the substructure and the superstructure of the temple, they had not finished the Tower of Antonia. The Tower of Antonia was part of the temple complex, but it was where the Roman authorities were to be housed, and the Roman military, so they could keep watch on the temple activities. And so that was not finished. And so the Roman governor then told these guys, Yeshua Binsi, he said that, listen, if you can work on your temple around the clock, including the Sabbath day, you absolutely are going to work on my facility, the tower. And so, again, the high priest gave the stonemasons permission to work on the Sabbath day on the tower also. Well, once it was complete, they had a great celebration. And with this celebration, dignitaries were called in, and family members and wives and so forth of the stonemasons to show them what great things they had done in this construction. And while this was going on, Yeshua Binsi stood up in the midst of the celebration and called attention to the great work that they had done and congratulated the stonemasons. And then he says, you know, you worked on the Sabbath day, which is contrary to the law of Moses, which is worthy of death if you break this. But because you're working on the temple, then you will not be punished. And because you were working on the temple, then that's understandable. But for working for the Romans on the Sabbath day, you will be punished. And with that pronouncement, then all 217 stonemasons had their right hands and their right arms crushed. And there was one of these, and then the high priest told them they had to go back to their homes and every Sabbath day they had to sit on the inside north wall of the synagogue of wherever the city or the village where they were, and they had to sit there all day long, be ridiculed by the people, and be pointed to by the leader of the synagogue, saying that this is what God does to those who he hates and those who he curses for breaking his laws. Well, it was one of these guys that Jesus confronted on that day. It was one of these stonemasons who had his hands crushed, who was the man with the withered hand. It had been almost 30 years now since the time he had done it. All that 30-year period, he felt like he was cursed of God, that there was no forgiveness for what he had done, because the high priest told him that there would be no forgiveness, and that he was cursed. God hated him. God would not forgive any of their sins in this life or the life to come. But it was on this day that Jesus walked into that synagogue, and one of these stonemasons was there, and Jesus healed him. And when he did, it was more than just a healing. It was with that healing, Jesus was telling all of them there, including the Pharisees and scribes who were there, that this man is not cursed. This man is not hated by God, and he is not cursed by God. And he is a victim of religious persecution. He's a victim of one man's hatred for another man and abuse of another man. Wow. So this is what we deal with in the Islamic world. Once these Muslim people accept Christ, well, they begin a life of horror like you never imagine. So they automatically become those same type of people that are cursed because of religious persecution. But Jesus healed him and made an example of what true forgiveness is all about.
And that's the kind of Jesus we serve.
That's right.
And that's the Jesus you serve, Dr. Ron. And I'm looking forward to to hearing more. I'm looking forward to seeing all the things that you're already doing, but you're also going to do on YouTube as well. And we're going to tell the world, who Jesus is. Who is Jesus to you, radio listeners? Get your hands on these teachings. Go to cubitfoundation.org. Get involved with Dr. Ron Charles with the Bags of Hope. Pastors, leaders, teachers, seekers. Invest in yourself and your people by getting these materials recorded by eyewitnesses, the Romans, and many other sources too. And get behind the Cubit Foundation. If you wish, take a look at Dr. Ron Charles on cubitfoundation.org. You will see some footage of some teaching, some footage of ministry. Know that you can call that number and connect and book him at your church. You won't be sorry. Start a tradition. The number one way to connect people to your church is special events. Well, what better special event can you have than learning the truth about Jesus? Time Magazine sells millions of dollars of the magazines, giving the same half-baked information about Jesus every year. Once you get the truth about Jesus that supports the Bible, that inspires your people, and at the end of the day is translated into a powerful ministry for people around the world that others don't even reach. But Jesus reaches them. Dr. Ron Charles reaches them too. Dr. Ron Charles, it's been such a pleasure having you on Up Radio, and excited to encourage people to go to cubitfoundation.org, get behind everything, get a copy of everything, download everything you can, knowing that it is fulfilling the Great Commission. It is also fulfilling Matthew 26, and also pray about bringing Dr. Ron Charles to your region while we have the freedom that we have. So may God bless you and keep you and make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you and give you peace. And Dr. Ron Charles, we love you. Keep doing the great work.
Thank you, my brother.
Thank you. And listeners, we'll talk to you next time on Up Radio.
Okay.